got 1 hour to go. Kevin Keatsman uncanceled. Takes over at 10 o'clock on KCMO. So we have hit July 1st. That means we are halfway through 2025. And besides the fact that Pride Month is over, so we can now start sleeping with our wives again, we are also looking back on the first 6 months of the year. And last hour I gave you the top 3 highs and lows from the first 6 months of the year nationally and worldwide. Now we'll do it Kansas City style and give you the top 3 highs of the year and the top 3 lows of the year. At number 1 for the top 3 highs of the year is Gene Peters Baker leaving as Jackson County prosecutor. Woo! We are pulling for Melissa Johnson. There is reason to believe that she can do a better job. Not that, you could really do a worse job than Gene, but there is evidence to suggest she is going to do a better job than Gene Peters Baker. I know that homicides in Kansas City are up right now, year to date from last year, but those numbers are actually down for the Jackson County portion of Kansas City, Missouri. The homicide numbers are largely up because of what has been a violent year up in the Northland, which obviously is Clay and Platte. But in Jackson County, they've seen a reduction in some of those crime numbers, which is where Melissa Johnson, the Jackson County prosecutor, is obviously in charge of. So Gene Peters Baker being out as the Jackson County prosecutor in and of itself was a big win this year for not just Jackson County and Kansas City, Missouri, but was a big win for the entire region because these criminals that Gene was slapping on the wrist were making their ways to other parts of the region. And it was not going well for Kansas City when it comes to the region's public safety. So the day that she left was a celebratory day in the state of Missouri, Kansas City region, Jackson County. Absolutely a big win. Number 2 on my list for the top 3 highs of the year. The Help Not Harm Act in Kansas. This is Senate Bill 63. And that prohibited healthcare providers from using surgeries, hormones, or puberty blockers on children under the age of 18. This was not about telling adults what to do. This was about protecting kids who, let's be honest, were being influenced by their parents and were being, frankly, abused by their parents. And now in Kansas, those days are over. Kansas is protecting children. Kansas is saying, listen, if you're 18, you're an adult, you do what you want to do. Now, if I cared about you, if I loved you, if you were a friend, if you were a family member, I would do everything in my power to talk you out of this. But I've never believed that the government should necessarily get in the way of you doing this if you're an adult. If you're a child, this is not controversial. We don't let kids smoke, drink, rent cars. Plenty of things that children cannot do. We're not going to call this ridiculous game of, well, we're letting families make their own health care decisions. No, you're not chopping off your kids' testicles. Sorry, not in this state. Not going to do it. And thank goodness we have people who are courageous enough to stand up for kids and protect children, even though there is a political movement to do the opposite of that right now in the Sunflower State. But that was obviously a big win. The Help Not Harm Act taking effect in Kansas earlier this year in February. And good job by the legislature on that front. And the third biggest high of the year, Kansas City style, halfway through the 2025 year, is the news of the day today. How about that? Frank White. The recall effort moves forward. The votes are in to have Frank White on the ballot to be recalled. This is something that Jackson Countyans have been trying to accomplish in some cases going back 2 years to the 2023 assessment. And now, 2 years in the making, the votes appear to be there. And Frank White, after talking about this for the better part of 24 months, a Frank White recall is likely to be on the ballot. As you heard Sean Smith just say last hour on KCMO, on Tuesday, August the 26th. Man, that's a big deal. And that is something that I know a lot of Jackson County residents are doing cartwheels over this morning. And it's definitely, just because of how long this story's been going on, by far one of the top highs of the year thus far in the Kansas City region for top stories in 2025. Now, on the other side, the top 3 lows of the year in the Kansas City area for 2025. So this one was tough because I was like struggling to come up with 3 highs, but I had like 10 lows. And that's just because we've got so many politicians who are clueless.
They don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. They just don't. So I'm like, man, I've got so many options to choose from here. But I got to whittle it down to 3. So my top 3 lows of the year, I guess I'll start with the Royals and Chiefs drama, right? I mean, you have to. At this point, it's just a low. It's dragged on too long. Taxpayers are left in the dark. Politicians are bending over backwards for the teams, doing everything they can to get on their good side. The teams are now driving the conversation. Here's what we want. Give it to us or else. It's just taken a really gross turn. Even as a fan of the teams, I spend money with the teams, go to the games, root them on, cheer them on. Like, we all do that, but 2 things can be true at once here. You cheer them on, you root for them, but the way that they've handled their end of the bargain here the last few months has just been disgusting. And they've pitted states against each other. They've pitted taxpayers against each other. And while they're a business and it's not illegal, and I know they have every right to search for the best deal, we've all heard it time and time again. I get it. I understand it. It doesn't mean it's not. It doesn't mean it can't also turn you off. The politicians have to say the right thing because they've got to play ball, no pun intended. But for the rest of us, it's just got the ick all over it. And we're past the point of just being fed up with how this whole process is playing out. Number 2 on the list, well, I know some of you wanted to forget this, but let's be honest. We got to talk about the Super Bowl. The Eagles blasting the Chiefs 40-22 in Super Bowl 59 this year. It's just no option. That was one of the top 3 lows of the year in Kansas City. We thought we might get the 3-peat. Had never been done in NFL history. And then the Eagles said, not so fast. Up 24-0 at halftime. And, of course, that score doesn't even really do the game justice based on how ugly it was. So that was definitely one of the top 3 lows of the year here in Kansas City. And you know what else? I mean, there's a lot of other options. I thought about the Black and Veatch and Overland Park deal. I thought about Brian Platt getting canned as the Kansas City, Missouri city manager. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about and put this on the list, the Tesla firebombing on State Line Road. Because that is one of those stories that obviously got national attention with this individual, Owen McIntyre. There's so much more about the story that we still do not yet know. But this young man, Owen McIntyre, who threw Molotov cocktails at the facility in March of 2025, there's so many layers to this. There's the way the media poo-pooed the whole thing. Kansas City Star wrote a piece in the last couple of weeks being like, I mean, nobody was in the car. What's the big deal? The same Kansas City Star wants to make sure that somebody who literally committed no violence on January 6th and just stumbled into the Capitol should be in the gulag for the next 20 years. Like, you can't have it both ways. You just can't. Then you also had the reports that this individual, Owen McIntyre, has been like transitioning or been involved with some hormone treatments. What does that do to one's brain? That's stuff that we've got to be studying. That needs to be getting more attention in this story, but probably won't. He's from, obviously, the Kansas City area. He was at school in Boston, came back for spring break, apparently, and then this whole thing happened on State Line Road. And it just ties into the entire story about Elon Musk and the way that Elon Musk's businesses were being harassed, assaulted, abused, because the guy was simply working for a duly elected president and trying to cut the $37 trillion in debt that this country currently finds itself in. That is the backbone of this story. makes this, to me, one of the three lows of the year in Kansas City.